there's always this pretty large and sometimes contentious sort of idea about what should be restricted. What do you consider competitive? What do you consider anti-competitive? And how does all that work? But restricting game content actually takes the game and sort of pushes it further away from how the vast majority of people actually play the game, where they play with everything. So it's on us as developers to properly balance the game for sure. It's on all of us who are interested in esports to promote a real healthy ecosystem where the public game and the competitive game can be as similar to one another as possible. That's why right here, right now, on this show tonight, we are going to demonstrate the bans and protect system. So when you're playing in a competitive game in arena or in a custom game, there's an entire metagame where players take turns deciding what piece of content they want to ban and what piece of content they want to protect. So before the game even starts, players are presented with a series of choices. Each player votes to ban or protect one piece of game content. Now, this is a very flexible system with a lot of custom configuration. Now, for the purposes of demonstration, we put all of the game content in the system. That's anything in Create a Class. That's all the score streaks. That's every specialist, weapon, or ability. That's hundreds of pieces of game content. So it's a whole new meta layer for the game, one that the players are in complete control of. This has the added benefit of truly demystifying that behind-the-scenes negotiation between players and leagues and developers that you were talking about. Now the players will decide, and those decisions will change moment to moment, game to game, and opponent to opponent.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because you mentioned specialists, which of course are new to Black Ops 3. They introduced a completely new class of weapons and abilities in the game, which can really, really shape a match. How do they fit into the competitive environment?
As we've talked about before, we like to say that the specialist weapons and abilities are designed to fit in that power band that exists between all of the content in Create a Class and the score streaks themselves. So it's absolutely true that specialist weapons and abilities are going to be extremely effective and very, very powerful in a competitive game situation. So, as an example, there is nothing quite like finding yourself in the right situational opportunity to activate Ruin's overdrive for a clutch run with the satellite drone, slam dunking it right in for a game-winning score. Now, this makes picking the right specialist or ability at the right time for the right game mode all that much more critical to the game. So specialists work with the competitive agenda in a very important way that we call the specialist draft. Now, the specialist draft is when each player from each side can only have one specialist weapon or ability per team. So let me use an example. Let's say it's a pro game, it's 4-on-4, it's uplink. During the setup of that game, only one player can take Ruin Overdrive. The other 3 players on that team have to take a different weapon from the specialist or a different specialist ability.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the teams have to think very, very carefully about what they pick. And but more importantly, I think, from a kind of podcasting perspective, I think there's a lot more to discuss in terms of the metagame and doing that analysis, which begs a really important question, which is what Maven and Mr. X have to say about it. So what are your guys' thoughts?
All right, this is amazing. Matt, you were a former professional FPS player. I was semi-professional at best, but you hear stuff like meta, balance. All these words just, man, I'm getting so pumped. Or just think of the way this is going to diversify and make it such a more dynamic gameplay.
And you get deeper into the bans and protects, right? A team that has a player like Clayster probably has to protect his dominant AR that he's really good with, or he has to get good with all the AR. So it adds so much more depth to the game than the way the specialists are used. A player like TP, maybe he goes for a more OBJ-minded specialist. And then, some of the best slayers in the game, they'll pick some of the weapon specialists and be able to use those to their advantage. So the game will change game to game, opponent to opponent.
Well, we saw just in the course of yesterday, really. Right. One player's going off big time with a specific rifle. Next thing you know, that gets banned next map. The course of, an esports season, the course of the game, the way to watch this stuff change is going to be absolutely amazing. But, we talked about the fact that we have competitive players here. We are, of course, going to be having some Black Ops 3 action. We've got Scott, main stage. We're going to have a live draft.